welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty simple. We take your sources, we cut right through the noise, and we give you the high-impact knowledge you need to be perfectly well-informed.
And today, we are tackling a stack of sources focused on a film that comes preloaded with just immense pressure. We're talking about the early critical reactions and social media buzz for 28 years later, The Bone Temple.
Exactly, and this isn't just any sequel. If you follow the release of the predecessor, 28 years later, I mean, you know that film took over 2 decades to even arrive.
Right.
And yet it didn't just meet expectations, it completely shattered them. It became a critical darling, cemented itself as one of the best movies of the year, and launched this whole new planned trilogy.
So the stakes could not be higher for this follow-up.
Yeah.
That success bought the creative team, a ton of goodwill, but it also means the bar for this sequel is
It's stratospheric.
Yeah.
Can they go 2 for 2? That's the real question. Our deep dive today is really designed to give you that synthesized verdict right away. Okay, let's unpack this immediately because you're right. The sources are not holding back, and that synthesized verdict is overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah, if you're looking for the immediate takeaway, that crucial nugget of knowledge, it's that the early reactions suggest The Bone Temple isn't just meeting the bar. It may already be cementing itself as one of the best movies of 2026.
Wow.
What's fascinating, though, is how the sources define that success. There are 2 defining, inescapable words coming out of every major review.
And they are.
Brutal and weird.
Brutal and weird. That is a compelling pairing, especially for a sequel. Usually weird means it's, only for the niche fans, and brutal just means more gore.
Right.
But the sources are suggesting this is a mainstream critical success. So how do those 2 elements combine to make it one of the best movies of the year?
Well, that's where the high praise reactions come in, which, like you said, are almost hyperbolic. One reviewer calls it, and I'm quoting here, arguably the best of the franchise.
That's a colossal statement given the original's legacy.
It is, and another describes it as exactly how you do a middle chapter of a trilogy.
Okay, let's sit with that middle chapter idea for a second. That's not just hype, that's like structural praise.
Yeah.
What makes a great middle chapter, and why are critics saying this film nailed it?
Well, typically a middle chapter has to avoid stalling. It has to raise the stakes, deepen the lore, and leave you really anticipating the conclusion, usually by introducing maximum peril.
Okay.
So by getting this kind of praise, the sources are signaling that the Bone Temple isn't just padding for time, it's building a necessary, much darker bridge.
And that darker bridge is defined by its weirdness. The sources characterize the film by its uncompromising, idiosyncratic ambition.
Idiosyncratic ambition. I mean, that is an amazing phrase. For the viewer, that usually means the creative team is prioritizing a unique, almost personal vision over, say, commercial appeal.
And when critics use words like weird and uncompromising, that usually points directly to the polarization factor. If it's this ambitious, it can't possibly appeal to everyone.
It absolutely does. I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the original 28 years later was already celebrated for its fearless, often polarizing approach. It introduced the rage-infected, it mixed body horror with sharp social commentary.
Sure.
Our sources highlight that this sequel seems to up the ante. One notes it is easily more polarizing than 28YL was. This film is doubling down on its unique, uncomfortable vision, not broadening its appeal.
That sounds like a gift for the established fan base, but it certainly raises an important question. If it's that polarizing and it's prioritizing weird ambition, what is the film actually about? Because if they're getting that ambitious, it often means they're moving away from the main attraction.
And that right there leads us to the biggest structural insight from the sources. This is the aha moment that dictates the film's entire focus.
Okay.
The Bone Temple largely sidelines the infected.
Wait, hold on. The entire reason this franchise exists, the hook of the 28 Days, Weeks, Years Later series, is the speed, the rage, the terror of the infected running around. To sideline the infected in the middle chapter of a trilogy, I mean, that is an enormous risk. It's like sidelining the shark in Jaws 2.
It is, and the reviews all acknowledge the magnitude of that swing. But they argue that this choice is precisely why the film is so successful and so polarizing. It lets the film shift its focus from, traditional jump scare horror to much deeper psychological and social themes.
So the horror becomes less about the monster outside and more about the societal rot inside.
That's it. So if we're not focused on the immediate physical threat of the rage virus, what are the complex internal ideas they're diving into that justify the word brutal.
Yeah, what are they?
We see a stack of very heavy themes emerging. The core concepts are occultism, trauma, psychosis, and compassion. It's shifting the horror from a race for survival to an existential crisis of, like, faith and control.
That thematic list is incredibly dense. How does a post-apocalyptic virus story naturally transition into a cult story centered on a false god, which is a phrase one source mentioned?
Well, that seems to be the sociological bridge the film walks so brilliantly. The original outbreak was epidemiological horror, right? But 28 years later, when the world is permanently broken...
People need control. They need meaning.
Exactly. The sources suggest the film is described as a brutal examination of faith, control, and fear. Another reviewer explicitly notes that it operates on a much weirder wavelength than its predecessor, tackling the idea of a false god in a surprisingly thorny manner.
So this isn't just some random cult thrown in. It's exploring the vacuum of leadership and belief that opens up when society collapses. The false god is likely some charismatic figure preying on that trauma.
That seems to be the consensus.
That complexity, using the setting as a petri dish for societal breakdown, that sounds like the definition of ambition. But one of the sources also called it the quietest yet undeniably most brutal installment. How can it be both?
Well, the quietness speaks to the shift in focus. By sidelining the infected, you reduce the noise of constant running and screaming.
Makes sense.
The brutality, on the other hand, is in the themes themselves. The visceral horror of psychosis, the psychological trauma, the internal betrayal of cultism. It's a horror that sinks in slowly, not one that just assaults you visually.
So the film deepens the lore by trading speed for depth. It leaves us with new questions and some long-awaited answers. It sounds like they understood that true horror isn't about how fast the monsters run.
It's about what humanity does when the world ends. That's the key insight. And if the film is achieving this level of brutal thematic depth, that naturally leads us to the minds driving this new vision. Let's talk about the key players.
It seems like a powerful combination of returning expertise and a fresh directorial vision, which is often the sweet spot for a sequel like this.
For sure. We have Alex Garland, who penned the original, back as the writer. His involvement basically guarantees that high-level thematic intelligence is still at the core.
But the director's chair is filled by Nia DaCosta, and the praise for her work here is immediate and significant. One source said this is yet more evidence that when you let Nia DaCosta cook, great things tend to happen.
And that specific phrase, "let her cook," signals that the film is visually and structurally confident, justifying that idiosyncratic ambition we were talking about.
Right.
She brought the necessary edge. But while the creative team is crucial, the sources all agree that the film is dominated by one specific electric performance that anchors all this thematic chaos.
Okay, so who is the MVP driving this human-centered horror?
Ralph Fiennes. He plays a Dr. Ian Kelson, and he is singled out as truly phenomenal and the clear, most valuable player.
Let's sit with that. An MVP performance in a film that sidelines the main monsters, that suggests his character is truly driving the horror. If the infected are reduced, Fiennes has to become the primary source of terror.
Precisely. His character appears to be the fulcrum of the film's cultism themes. The specific hype is focused on him, and I'm quoting again, tearing the house down with one especially insane sequence that rightfully drew applause.
Wow. It sounds like a career-defining, genre-elevating performance.
It does. It provides the necessary emotional and theatrical weight to those brutal psychological themes we mentioned.
And that's the kind of thing that elevates an already polarizing film and just makes it unforgettable, regardless of whether you agree with the big structural choices. I also see mentions of a strong ensemble cast.
Absolutely. The main cast noted includes Jack O'Connell as Jimmy Crystal, Alfie Williams as Spike, Aaron Kellyman, Shea Lewis Perry, and Aaron Taylor Johnson as Jamie. It's a loaded ensemble, but Fiennes is clearly the magnetic focal point here.
Okay, let's wrap up the logistical details. The wait for this ambitious, brutal, and weird film is almost over. The Bone Temple is set to debut in theaters on January 16th, 2026. Genres are horror, sci-fi, and thriller.
And perhaps the most exciting part for anyone invested in the narrative. A third and final outing is explicitly confirmed to be in development. So this really was conceived as a middle chapter.
Which guarantees a certain level of narrative importance for the Bone Temple. It has to propel the story, not just fill time. One reviewer, summing up their enthusiasm, joked, "I want one of these films annually for as long as I live." The hype is definitely running high.
But we have to introduce a crucial note of perspective here, especially with early reactions. We are discussing critical industry response, which often gets excited about ambition and originality.
Yes, the film industry echo chamber. The hype machine is incredibly powerful.
What's so fascinating is that the sources themselves contain some of this skepticism that you, the listener, need to consider. We found one audience comment that questions relying on critics who do nothing but watch movies versus everyday people that actually have a life.
That is a very valid point, and it's important context. These initial reactions are from industry insiders, from journalists who are acutely aware of film history, cinematic language, narrative structure.
Right. They reward a film that takes risks and innovates, like Nia DaCosta sidelining the monsters.
Exactly. A critic's best movie of the year might mean structurally groundbreaking and thematically rich, but that doesn't automatically mean a general audience member who bought the ticket for maximum zombie action will agree.
The critique suggests The Bone Temple might be a critic's movie because it's so uncompromising. And that distinction is key for setting your expectations.
So let's bring it all back home for you. What is the core knowledge you are walking away with today about the Bone Temple?
Well, this sequel is shaping up to be an intensely ambitious, high-wire middle chapter. It's expected to be extremely weird, brutally thematic, and focus less on the infected threat and much more on deep, dark concepts like cultism, faith, and societal psychosis.
And if you are heading to the theater, prepare for a standout, potentially MVP-winning performance from Ralph Fiennes that anchors the entire experience.
That summary reveals a film that is using the post-apocalyptic setting not just for cheap scares, but as a framework to explore humanity's deep-seated psychological breakdowns.
It's elevating the philosophical stakes of the entire franchise.
And setting up a very intense final chapter.
So, building on that idea that the film is more polarizing and delves into cultism and a false god, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought. When a genre sequel chooses to sideline its most recognizable element, the infected, the monsters, the engine of its success, to focus almost entirely on humanity's internal flaws, does that raise the stakes of the horror, or does it merely change the genre entirely? Something for you to mull over as the film approaches its January 16, 2026 debut. Thank you for sharing your sources with us for this deep dive. We'll see you on the next one.